In previous days, Sayadaw has been going over what is mentioned, what is taught by the Buddha in the beginning of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the part called the Odesa. This describes what is the yogi's task. And Sayadaw has been describing this slowly so that the yogis can do it experientially. Only if one understands the method can one put it into practice. And so Sayadaw has been teaching like this so that the yogis can make whatever time they have useful within a short time. So only if ardent effort, virya, is present, and only if there's steadfast sati, only if the mind falls collectedly on the object, and only if aim is accurate, only then will the knowledge called sampajanya occur. And only then, only when these four qualities mentioned above occur on kaya, will there be kayanupasana. When these four qualities of virya, firm sati, collected khanika samadhi, accurate aim, and therefore knowledge, when they are used to observe Vedana, then only then will there be Vedananupasana. When one observes thinking, imagining, and other mind objects, only then will there be Chittanupasana. When one observes seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling, all the objects that are called Dhamma, only if there's ardent virya, sati, samadhi, accurate aim, and knowledge, does Dhammanupasana occur. There are four kinds of objects. Therefore there are four kinds of satipatthana. But by now one knows this meaning of anupasana. The meaning of satipatthana hasn't yet been explained. And Sayadaw will explain this in future days. In summary, whatever arises, what he's going to speak about tonight is that in summary, when we don't observe whatever object arises, as soon as it arises, with this anupasana, then kilesas enter the mind. And when virya is not there to dispel laziness and so on, then we'll just be experiencing kilesas, mental defilements, all the time. When we apply virya and the other qualities mentioned, that is, we observe repeatedly, then the kilesas don't enter. And to express this, Sayadaw mentioned a principle, which is that you could say not noting kilesas come in. Observing kilesas come clean. One who doesn't know the correct path of satipatthana, the correct method of satipatthana, or who knows it but doesn't take the time to practice it, one who doesn't establish sati, mindfulness, such a person's life, such a person's being is continually caught up in lobha, greed, dosa, anger, and moha, delusion. So if one doesn't cultivate one's plot of land, then it becomes a weed patch. And in one's being, kilesas, the mental defilements, are like weeds. Sometimes lobha, arises, sometimes dosa, and all the time moha, delusion, wavering, that's always arising. These three, lobha, dosa, and moha, are the roots of akusala. And as long as we're not free of these roots, we won't be free of akusala. And those who don't cultivate the practice will spend their time, all the time, with kilesas. Just like those who don't cultivate a piece of land that they own, on that land weeds will arise. In one's physical and mental, in one's nama and rupa, in one's being, kilesas are sprouting. And this, thus, our nama and rupa is called Kilesa Bhumi. Bhumi means the earth or the land where things grow. So Kilesa Bhumi means the place where the defilements of lobha, dosa, moha, and so on grow. If one doesn't observe our being, our five khandhas, our nama and rupa, they become Kilesa Bhumi, the ground for kilesas to arise. Okay, Sayadaw said that, Sayadaw mentioned two Pali words, pariññata and apariññata. Pariññata means discerning the stream of nama and rupa, our being, with knowledge. And the yogis now who are practicing respectfully and carefully, starting with the rising and the falling, observing whatever arises, these yogis are accomplishing this pariññata. For them, that knowledge is developing in them. So applying virya, developing sati, samadhi, accurate aim, so that sampajanya occurs. Anupasana is occurring, the repeated observation. As Sayadaw said before, sampajanya and anupasana are the same. So when knowledge develops, one begins by knowing nama and rupa, discerning the physical and the mental, and then further seeing how they are related as cause and effect. And further one comes to see how these physical and mental phenomena arise and pass away. If so, one is knowing one's being correctly, and regarding what one observes, abheja or lobha, greed, has no chance to arise. There's no chance either for domanassa, or basically anger, dosa, to arise. Knowing we are free of these kilesas and all kilesas. Why is it? Because we are knowing with virya, sati, samadhi, and accurate aim. If we don't apply energy to observe the object, then sati will not become firm. Sati will not arise and will not become firm. And without firm sati, the mind will not fall collectedly on the object. Thus the mind will go to thinking about good sights, good sounds, wanting good things to have. So, if we don't observe the arising nama rupa as it occurs, then moha, we won't know it, and so moha, delusion, will arise. And when we encounter something attractive, then there will be greed, lobha. If we encounter something despicable, hateful, then there will be dosa, anger. So there will always be delusion, if we're not observing, and there will be either one of these two, lobha or dosa. And in addition, there will be other unwholesome mental factors occurring together with these. As long as we're awake, if we're not observing, akusala is going to arise. Only when we're asleep will we be free of it, if we're not applying the practice. When we're awake, whatever we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, even acts such as opening, closing the eyes, blinking, and so on. Without the method of satipatthana, if we don't observe all these arising phenomena, we won't know them. And thus kilesas will enter into our mind stream. So it said, apariññata kanda kilesanan bhumi. When the khandas, the group of nama and rupa, of mentality and physicality, is not discerned clearly, then they become the place for kilesas to arise. And the reason is because our being of nama and rupa is not discerned clearly with knowledge. If one doesn't apply virya, then laziness can't be overcome, as well as other defilements, and mindfulness will not be firm. Therefore, the mind will just go to thoughts of sense pleasures. We won't come to know nama and rupa, therefore, because our mind won't be focused on the object. And not knowing nama rupa, mind and matter, we can't come to know how they're related by cause and effect. So every moment, akusala will be growing, so that our life will just be like a forest of akusala, unwholesomeness. So this is Kilesa Bhumi. And those who don't know the practice of satipatthana, or knowing it, they don't apply it, or if they apply it, they do so lightly, this is what will be happening. The body that we have will become the ground for kilesas to arise. Applying the practice respectfully and carefully is very, very valuable. If we don't, then kilesas have a chance to arise. But if we build up the power to observe, our mind becomes stable, first of all, and then knowledge develops, the knowledge of what is mentality, what is physicality, the knowledge of cause and effect. One sees how whatever one observes arises and passes away. One comes to know their impermanent suffering and selfless nature. So this is like our being of nama and rupa becomes like a plot of land that we cultivate. First of all, we pull out the weeds, and then we plant flowers. The flowers are beautiful. And we can plant fruit trees so that we have food. So one who understands this analogy will use the life that one has while one is still alive so that it is very beneficial. To develop a clean mind, to develop knowledge. The basis that the yogis here need to have is the continual application of three kinds of effort. Thus one is a true yogi. A true yogi is always applying ardent effort. And one has to practice. One has to always be applying the practice. So one has to always push the mind to reach the arising object. When one pushes the mind to the object, it reaches the object, and sati sticks, mindfulness sticks to the object, and thus the mind does not wander. When that happens, kilesas don't enter one's mind stream, and the mind falls collectedly on the object. And when our aim becomes accurate, then there's no thoughts of sense pleasure, no kama vitaka, and no other forms of necha vitaka, wrong thought. Yeah. What this is kaya anupasana, repeated observation of the arising physical object. And one must always have this type of observation. One must always possess this type of observation, and thus one is called anupasi. One has to gain skill, that is, one has to make one's aim accurate in order for sampajanya to occur. Sampajanya is what Sayadaw described as knowing correctly and distinctly, knowing fully and distinctly, knowing for oneself distinctly, knowing correctly in a special way, knowing fully in a special way, knowing for oneself in a special way. When one applies the practice, sampajanya will occur. And this is also called anupasana. When one possesses anupasana, one is called anupasi. And with this, doing this anupasana, one must live. It said viharati. One must live, one must dwell. What is meant by this? Does this mean sitting, standing, walking? And Sayadaw will explain this now. The word viharati, or to dwell, has both a large-scale meaning and a detailed meaning. So first of all, to look at the large scale, what it means to dwell. There are 4 basic postures that we may be in, and we're always in one of those. There's sitting, there's walking or going, there's standing, and there's lying down. There are these 4 basic kinds of posture, and we're always in one of these 4 positions. Within these 4 postures, there are many, many small movements that also need to be observed. So, abekante, patekante, sampajana kari hoti. Sayadaw didn't say that. So he said that when we go forward, or whether we're going forward or going backward, when doing this movement, we should apply sati to know the action clearly. Of course, sati is not the only one. There's also virya and samadhi. This is sampajanya or sampajano. One should do these actions with mindfulness and clear comprehension. This going forward and going backward, of course, it's obvious during walking, but we could also be sitting and moving our body forward or backward. We could be standing and moving it forward or backward. Or we could be lying down and move the body forward or backward. Each time we do this type of movement, we need to do it with clear comprehension and mindfulness. And the next set of actions, alokite vilokite sampajana kari hoti. Alokite means to look straight ahead, and vilokite means to look to the side. Of course, while we do the practice, we only look because there's a reason. We have to look at something, otherwise we won't. Whenever we deliberately look at something, we have to do it mindfully. apply mindfulness, virya and samadhi to know the object clearly. Visions. If one looks at the large scale. So, viharati means being in any one of these postures. So that means that one has to have anupasana, this repeated observation, whatever posture one may be in. Whatever posture one may be in, one needs to observe the arising kaya when it arises. One needs to observe the arising vedana when it arises. One needs to observe the arising thinking, planning, imagining, and so on when it arises. One needs to observe the arising seeing, hearing, tasting, and other dhammas when they arise. So there's no gap in this. There's no empty space. In other words, it means while sitting, this anupasana should be there. When we're walking, this anupasana should be there. When standing, it should be there. When lying down, anupasana should be there. If one observes the arising object, one will see the nama and rupa, the mentality and physicality, which is there. Nama and rupa is not just to be observed while we're sitting. It's to be observed in all four postures. And yogis must understand this. So also whatever acts one does, such as urinating, defecating, putting on one's clothes, holding the cup, holding a spoon, eating the food, drinking something, all the actions that we perform need to be done with observation and knowing. So regarding eating and drinking, how we hold the utensils and how we take food needs to be noted in detail. And whatever we take in, the things that we don't use have to be expelled. So also, we have to observe the acts of urinating and defecating mindfully and fully aware. From the very start of the inclination to urinate or to defecate, the feeling of pressure in one's belly, and so on, from the whole process has to be done mindfully and fully aware. So whether our physical action is something large or something small and detailed, we need to do it mindfully and fully aware. Whether we're standing with our hands together calmly, whether we're walking or sitting or lying down, this all should be observed mindfully and fully aware. Gate tite nisene saite sampajana kari hoti. So even when we fall asleep, we should be mindful and fully aware. And on waking, sagarite, we should be mindful and fully aware. Basite, when speaking, if we have to speak, it should be done mindfully and fully aware. Tunhi bawe, even while keeping silent, we should remain observing the obvious object within us. All the detailed actions that we do, even down to closing and opening our eyes and blinking, should be done, should be observed so that we know them. And thus, this word viharati, to dwell or to live, refers to whatever posture we are in, being in whatever posture we are in. One who can note whether it's one of the four main postures or especially the small movements. One who can, That is, one who knows the benefits of Satipatthana, has the desire to get them and therefore applies energy to observe the arising object. Such a one gets 7 benefits, and the first of these is purity of mind. Through the practice, one's mind becomes refined, cultured, pure and delightful. Thus, one's mind is high value. And when one applies the practice, one gains control over oneself. One also, because one has control over oneself, one doesn't give trouble to anybody else. And therefore one's environment is peaceful. One who conquers oneself doesn't abuse others. So understanding the benefits of Satipatthana, one applies ardent effort, atapa. So one possesses this ardent energy in whatever posture, observing whatever posture one is in, whether it's the large postures such as sitting, standing, walking and lying down, or whether it's the small actions that we take. So when we repeatedly observe all the actions, whatever we're doing in any waking moment, our sati becomes special. And as much as sati is special, the samadhi also becomes special. As we practice, we become skilled in aiming. With accurate aim, the mind rubs against the object, and sampajanya occurs. Sampajanya, knowing correctly in a distinct way, knowing fully in a distinct way, knowing for oneself in a distinct way, or knowing correctly in a special way, knowing fully in a special way, knowing for oneself in a special way. This knowledge is not due to reading. It's not due to hearing about this from a teacher. It's due to one's practice. So one has to dwell with this sampajanya, this clear comprehension. And as Sayadaw mentioned, the 2 principles before, that I have to turn to where I wrote it. Not knowing, not noting, not knowing, kilesas come in. Observing, kilesas come clean. So when we're clean and pure, when our mind is clean and pure, the value of our life goes up. The measure of the value of one's life are things like knowledge, having a cultivated mind. And this method is the most correct way to raise up the quality of one's life. So Sayadaw urges all of you, in this time that you have, please try your best to accomplish this. That's all for today.